Alright, so I know I'm a little bit late to the party here, but last fall Netflix dropped this film called Blonde about the late actress Marilyn Monroe. This is a film that was not on my radar at all, and I really only became aware of it because of controversy, both in the real world and on Reddit. One of those is far superior and more important and relevant than the other, but I'm not going to say which. Regardless, the point is, I only came aware of this movie because people were mad about it. I didn't know anything about it, didn't have any expectations, just heard, hey, everybody's pissed off. With that in mind, everybody was mad, and yet it seemed like a lot of people hadn't, I think the term is watched the movie. That's kind of what I'm looking for. Now, granted, a lot of people who had watched this movie were angry too, so there's that. So being the book and movie guy I am, when I found everybody was upset and talking about this thing, I figured I should do the book and movie guy thing and watch it. But first, I needed to read it because it's based upon a Joyce Carol Oates novel of the same name. So I did that, checked the book up from the library. It took me a while, but I read it, and then I watched the movie, and now here we are. First of all, this is not going to necessarily be like a review of the film or of the book or comparison of the two. There will be some elements of that in this video, but really what I want to do is explore the criticism and the hubbub and the controversy around this film, and basically pose a fairly simple question. Is film criticism dead? So I want to get a few things out of the way right off the bat. This is not going to be a video complaining about like woke Hollywood, cancel culture, complaining about people being aware of social ethics in the media they consume. Nothing like that. I mean, I'm going to do some exploring and criticizing of that. But if you're looking for a video that is here to complain about, again, social justice or wokeness in Hollywood, in media, books, whatever, this is not the video for you. Like, go get lost. There's plenty of Star Wars videos for you to be watching. Bye-bye. At times, it's going to seem like my motive is to complain about those things, but I promise that it's not. I just think that it's valuable to explore the nuances of these issues and to comment on how they can impact actual film criticism and what the purpose of film criticism actually is. That's really going to be the central question explored in this video, not whether criticism is dead, but really what it can be used for these days. Is criticism dead is just a good like clickbait title I can put in the thumbnail and hopefully maybe get more than 10 people to watch the video with, because again, it's a reason to be mad. So a lot of these issues that I'm going to be talking about in the video, again, like evaluating the ethics of the film that you're making, being aware of social justice or the morality of the people involved in making a film, are not necessarily new things in criticism. They're just really heightened right now. A lot of criticism currently is shifted from looking at the quality of the film to the quality of the people making the film or the quality of the motives behind the film. As a result, the way a lot of people view or judge a film is kind of based on the social mood or movement at the time and how it portrays certain groups, people, or figures. That, I think, can be very damaging and make criticism very messy and less effective than it has been in the past. Again, I want to be clear that that's not the type of thing that I'm going to be criticizing here. What I'm going to be criticizing is people who don't watch products or don't watch films, books, read them, whatever, and instead kind of rely on that type of criticism that is based on social outcry and form their opinions based on that instead of actually watching the films and coming to an opinion of their own. That's the type of thing that bothers me, and that's the type of thing that I think is changing what the purpose of film criticism is for. I want to be upfront saying that I'm way more cavalier than most people about saying that I will watch or read anything. Like, I will watch and read things that I don't like, just so I feel like I have a valid reason to complain about it if everybody else is doing so, or to defend it if everybody is complaining about it. I've never really felt good at looking at criticism or reviews as just a tool to gauge whether or not I should watch or read something. I know that this is what a lot of people use criticism for, and it's just not something that I've ever been comfortable with or interested in. I know that a lot of people use criticism and reviews as a way to gatekeep what is or is not worthy of their time. There is so much content out there, good and bad, and if you have like a full-time job or go to school or something, there's not a lot of time to devote to watching and reading everything. So it makes sense they need some sort of litmus test to determine what you should or should not watch. However, I think it leads to a lot of people who are kind of stunted in critical terms because they're formulating their opinions based on things that other people have watched. It's hard for them to explore and find content of their own to uniquely love or care for because they're relying exclusively on the word of mouth of other people who may or may not actually have a good, educated, or worthwhile opinion. I understand people not wanting to waste time or money on something that is subpar or upsetting. I completely get that. For myself, though, like, that doesn't bother me. As I said, I want to watch the stuff and find out what it is for myself. If you're thinking I sound extremely pretentious and uptight, I don't have a good defense. You're probably right. For me, the way I like to engage with material is on a one-on-one basis, not through a layer of mediation through somebody else, whether that be another critic, a friend, a video analysis, whatever. I like to look at that stuff after I've already seen the text for what it is on a one-on-one basis. With that in mind, though, I should be totally honest. There's things that I'm not interested in actually watching. And my girlfriend will point this out all the time. Shout out to Abby. Hi. But that doesn't mean that I still won't watch it or try to give it like a fair shot. I think it's important for us to recognize our own biases and irrational preferences in like every aspect of life, and that includes criticism. But if I don't think that criticism is there to gatekeep or determine what is or is not worth watching, then what do I think criticism is for? What do I think its purpose is? Well, let me put on the fedora and the neckbeard, and I'll tell you, m'lady. For me, since day one, criticism has really always been about conversation, about dialogue. Like, since I first got involved in this stuff when I was like 12 and would only ever watch YouTube videos by like Jeremy Johnson, Chris Stuckman, those videos were still never to me just a way of telling me what to watch. I liked watching reviews from those guys because they were able to articulate things about movies that I couldn't at the time. They were able to explain why I felt a certain way about something. They made me understand some of the terminology and vocabulary important for these conversations. Or conversely, I loved watching those videos to hear people explain why they didn't like something that I did, or vice versa. Again, that kind of dialogue piece and the alternate perspective part of criticism and reviewing is something that was really important to me as a kid and has really shaped me, I think, as an adult, as a writer, as a teacher, as a book and movie guy, whatever. To me, criticism has always been a cyclical nature based on understanding and new perspectives from conversations with other people. I've watched a lot of reviews or read a lot of articles or seen a lot of reviews and comments on places like Goodreads that say things like, wow, thanks for the honest review of this. I'll be skipping it. Don't want to waste my time. Bye. And things like that make my blood boil and rage shoot to 100 in ways that a review I disagree with simply never have. I think people basing their opinions exclusively on reviewers it's lazy. I teach high school English, and I recently did a literary theory and criticism unit with my seniors, and one of my main goals of that unit was to drill in their noggins that the point of criticism or critics or reviewers is not to tell you whether something is just good or bad. I mean, yes, that is the purpose of like somebody writing for your local newspaper or for some blogs, but criticism in the abstract as a whole, in the canon, in academia, whatever, is not there just to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to a work. Criticism is there to explore and understand the meaning of something through various critical lenses and forms of analysis. Oftentimes, these forms of analysis will bring a critic or a reviewer to the conclusion that yes, something is unethical. Something is portraying a certain group or certain person in an unethical way, and that needs to be discussed. They can do this through a variety of lenses, like performing a post-colonial reading of something, a feminist reading of something, a deconstructionist reading of something, looking at something through a racial lens, whatever, environmental. Those are all great, important, and perfectly valid readings because they are performed through important conversation. Like, those conversations need to be had and those readings need to be made. I just think that there is a specific way to do it that still involves thinking about the art, which is being neglected by a lot of people who are like barely acquainted with criticism or art in general, and again are instead just bandwagoning on the thought bubbles of other people who are, at best, marginally acquainted with criticism as a form of writing. I'm completely aware that there's been a lot of really bad shit happening behind the media that we love for years, like Hollywood and the publishing industry are extremely corrupt and take advantage of people and ostracize people and treat them in terrible ways, and people don't want that to keep happening. I don't want it to keep happening. So I think it is a total necessity to be aware of those things and how mistreatment is perpetuated throughout the industry. I just think that there are a lot of people who are bandwagoning on these kind of lofty ideas and following along in a reactionary way without actually putting in the work to understand or rectify those issues. That kind of reactionary logic is really bogging down the conversation and criticism around these works, and that is what is finally bringing me to the topic of today's video, Blonde. So a lot of the criticisms around Blonde are, I think, not good. There was a lot of talk about the film being over-sexualized, exploitative, historically inaccurate, people complaining about certain agendas it has, and filming in the place where Marilyn Monroe died. All totally valid, completely reasonable complaints, but I'm going to say something that I think is going to piss a lot of people off, or at least make a lot of people go, huh? And it's this. None of those things have anything to do with the actual quality of the film. And I will say more by highlighting, I think that we need to divorce ethical criticism and analysis from actual qualitative analysis of what a film is. Yes, it is important to recognize both, but bad ethics do not equate to a bad movie, and a good movie does not equate to good ethics, and vice versa. Of course, if your goal as a consumer is to consume only media that is created in an ethical manner, then this divorce is completely impossible for you. You're a little kid screaming, crying in the corner while the parents get into a shouting match and separate. It's just not going to work for you. And I get that's not going to work for a lot of people, and I understand that. My point is that, for me, that doesn't work. Being the kid in the corner does not work. I want the divorce. I need the divorce. Give me the divorce. Please. 2 Christmases. I want it. So to reiterate, we basically have 3 purposes of criticism here. To determine what is ethical, to determine what is worth watching, and to determine the true meaning or quality behind things. These are 3 very different forms of criticism, and I think that right now they're getting kind of wrapped up in a gooey bundle that isn't satisfying to anyone. Like, you know how you get like a ham and pickle roll-up, and the pickle is wrapped in the ham, and then there's like some cream cheese, and then like a really good a wrap of some kind around it, and then you bite into it, and the pickle crunches, and everything blends together, and it's just satisfying, and it's like, That's not what we're getting with the blending of these 3 criticisms. We're getting a diluted mess that is not good. With that said, I still try to be pretty aware of the ethics behind the media that I consume and not support things which I feel are unethical. For example, I will say that in the past I may or may not have become a sailor and sailed upon the 7 seas to view a film that I did not want to contribute money towards. If you know, you know, and I'm sure a lot of you know. I feel like this is a pretty happy medium because it allows me to still watch and engage with a book or a movie and have my own real opinion on it, while also not supporting or perpetuating that film or series or studio or whatever. It's a way for me to understand what's going on, but not tell the studio, hey, I want more of this shitty product, or hey, I want more of this exploitation. Give it to me. So then why did I watch Blonde in the correct way on Netflix? This might be kind of a bad opinion, but to me, boycotting something like Blonde is useless, because the person that Blonde is harming is, well, they are very, very, very dead. Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, like, respect or uphold in a positive way Marilyn Monroe's image, or anybody else's image. Like, I think that's important. It's important not to defame or desecrate, like, the image or the memory of a person. But I think that when you're talking about something abstract, like a deceased person's reputation, that is a lot different than boycotting something because you know for a fact it is currently doing harm to a marginalized group or people. Secondly, I also think that a lot of the criticism and boycott and non-watching and complaints about Blonde stem from a misunderstanding about the movie, what it is, and what it's trying to be or do. And this is not going to be like everybody misunderstands this movie except for me moment or video, because that's not the case. I just think that there's a lot of people who aren't really looking at the full picture of Blonde as a film. So at this point, I should probably give you my very brief thoughts, mini review, whatever, on Blonde, just so you know that I'm on your side. Or maybe not, depending on whatever your side and my side is. To be as quick as possible, I think this movie's fine. It's not great, and I also don't think it's the worst thing ever like a lot of people do. A lot of the editing, the visuals, the way this thing is filmed, scored, the performances, especially by Ana de Armas, they're all amazing. Like, visually, this film is an incredible spectacle. It's like a dream. It's fascinating to watch, and in that aspect, I really love it. But in terms of the script and pretty much everything else, it's not very good. The script is deeply shallow, the pacing is terrible, this movie's too fucking long. And yeah, a lot of the portrayal of Marilyn Monroe and other historical figures is shaky at best. The director is also like a weird guy, it seems like, and a lot of his comments about the movie made me uncomfortable and think that's... And there's also a lot of moments, it's like the Game of Thrones effect, where Marilyn Monroe is naked, and I found myself thinking that I'm looking at some boobies right now. And I really don't need to be. This isn't necessary. This is just odd. Please, get this off my screen. There's also a scene early-ish, kind of halfway-ish through this movie when Marilyn Monroe goes to an audition, and she leaves the audition, and instead of talking about her performance, one of the guys remarks on the size and stature of her caboose. And instead of focusing on the man, as he says this line, the camera focuses on a fairly flattering shot of Marilyn Monroe's posterior region. And I understand that the purpose of this scene is to critique, like, the industry. Like, look, instead of focusing on this audition or performance she just gave, they're only talking about her physical beauty. Okay, perfectly good critique. The problem is that when you then have an attractive shot of said woman, you are adding to the exploitation. Like, you're not providing commentary or critique. You're doing the same thing. And this is very bizarre to me, and a complaint that I understand a lot of people having. Like, I think it's totally valid that that is a gratuitous and misuse of camera work, basically. And this happens several times throughout the film, where, like, the framing of the critique or the criticism is done in a glossy, romantic, or sexy way. And when you portray it positively visually like that, it's not a visual condemnation, it is a visual condonement. Again, this depends on the context around it, but usually it's odd and is undercutting the film's supposed self-professed theme, and I understand why a lot of people would be bothered by that thematic incoherence, whatever. I want to compare this to another movie that has a female protagonist that largely focuses on the male gaze and the way that it can perpetuate stereotypes and harm the women that are subject to it. That movie is, of course, The Silence of the Lambs. A huge part of this film, and the way that it is filmed and structured, is around the male gaze, or how the males in Clarice's sphere, in her workplace, in whatever, view and look at her. There was a lot of camera work that follows her around from the perspective of, like, the males, or that shows the male perspective of her. The main difference is that usually this perspective is from Clarice's, so she is seeing men ogling her and staring at her. But the difference is that we're seeing it from her perspective. To her, and therefore to us the audience, it's not flattering, it is not glossy, it's not romantic, it's not sexy. It's weird, awkward, uncomfortable, and at times terrifying. And when the camera is following her from the male perspective, again, it's not flattering. It's strange and is like found footage, basically, and she's not being framed in a sexually gratuitous or exploitative manner. Like, she is definitely being framed as a victim, and that's very clear to the audience, who are not thinking, yes, that is an attractive woman. They're thinking, this is strange, I don't like this. Or at least, hopefully they are. So again, the male gaze in Blonde a lot of times is portrayed as positive, whereas in Silence of the Lambs, it is not. The only time in Silence of the Lambs it is really swapped, where we're seeing Clarice from a male perspective for a long length of time, is in the finale. And we're seeing it from Buffalo Bill's perspective, when he is hunting her through a dark basement using night vision glasses. It is terrifying and awful and disgusting, and is like the ultimate version of this metaphor perspective wrapped up in a nice little bundle. The way that women are frequently hunted or preyed upon by men with nefarious goals in the workplace or in the world or whatever. Now again, to flip back to Blonde, the same thing is done, but once more we are checking out Marilyn right along with those weird men. And what's doubly strange about this is, the movie is aware of this perspective and this incoherence, because there is a scene, and actually I think this is a phenomenal scene, one of the best scenes in the film, toward the end when Marilyn is getting out of a car and walking up a red carpet in front of a crowd. There's all these men cheering at her, and when they cheer and scream and call and reach out to her, their mouths get really big, like monsters. They look terrible and terrifying and are not flattering at all. In this case, we are seeing the male gaze from Marilyn's perspective, and it is not glossy, it's not sexy, it's not attractive, it's awful. The music playing during the scene is the same that plays earlier in the film, when Marilyn Monroe's mother drives her through a very dangerous wildfire, so it's creating a good thematic link between the danger of fire and the danger of this crowd of men, and it works beautifully. It's perfect. Why then is the film portraying the same perspective positively earlier on? I could go into a reading of this and make a case of what I think the film was trying to do, but I'm not going to. I instead want to focus on another scene towards the end of the film, when Marilyn Monroe is basically being stalked by the CIA in her own apartment. It is dark, and they're getting ready to abduct her, and they're looking at her through night vision glasses. To me, this scene is a clear homage to the one in The Silence of the Lambs. You cannot tell me this shit is not intentional. In terms of the book upon which Blonde is based, again, it's 50-50. Some elements of the novel are adapted perfectly, like the structure, the perspective switches, the tone. Those are all adapted perfectly. Like, this feels the same way that the book does. Some elements of Marilyn Monroe are adapted really well, whereas some other elements and other characters really are not. Whereas the novel portrays a very nuanced and complex character who's easy to root for because she has so many different layers and is treated so poorly because of those layers, the film creates a very simplistic, kind of just breathy, exasperated, and stressed out character who's just sort of a punching bag over and over for no real reason. That's similar to the novel, but again, in the novel, we get a lot more perspective into Marilyn Monroe's mind and the perspectives of the people around her. The film does not really do this. Everyone in the film looks at her and treats her the same way, and a lot of the interesting and important character work from Monroe's early life that's present in the novel is completely gone from the film. Whereas the novel has a lot of scenes focusing on her educational interests and her poetry and her writing and, again, her thoughts on art in general, the film is just like, no, if it's not related to one of her marriages or romantic relationships, it's not worth spending time on. Whereas the novel, again, dedicates a lot of time to the romances, yes, but also a lot of time to her familial relationships and relationships just to the community and the people around her, which is what, to me, made the character and the world that she lives in as part of Joyce Carol Oates' novel so interesting and engaging. The film just, no, bye-bye. Marilyn Monroe's mother as a character is one of the ones who suffers the most. The film really shifts focus from her mother, Gladys, to the abstract idea of Marilyn Monroe's father. Again, this is in the book, but it's extremely amplified in the film. Throughout the novel, Marilyn Monroe visits her mother constantly to give her updates on her life and to try to be involved. In the film, I think she visits her mother once. Her mother's main scene is early in the film when she tries to drown a child version of Marilyn Monroe in a bathtub, a scene that is largely completely fiction, fabricated, made out of nothing. This is like a very exaggerated version of things that happen in the book, and I can understand why people would be bothered by this portrayal of mental illness as something reduced simply to violent outbursts and then complete dissociation from the rest of the real world. Like, that is bothersome and confusing. However, I think that this question about portrayal and historical accuracy raises an interesting question, as important as they are. And that question is, how much does any of this really matter? How much does the historical accuracy or correct representation matter to the film? Another issue with the criticisms around this film stem largely from a misunderstanding what the film is due to marketing and expectations. A lot of people went into this film wanting or expecting like a traditional biopic of Marilyn Monroe, which is not what this movie is at all. It is an adaptation of a book that is largely fiction based on accounts of another person's life. There's like 3 layers of mediation from this movie and its real, genuine Monroe source material. Outside of like recreating photographs and film moments, this movie is not at all interested in history. Like, this movie could not give a fuck about correctly telling true events. It wants to tell a dramatic and interesting story about the destruction of a female character, based on a book. Which it does. The biggest example of this is in Marilyn Monroe's relationship with the characters Charlie Chaplin Jr. and Eddie G. They're both characters in the book, they're both real people, but the way they're written both in the novel and in the film is like completely, entirely divorced from reality. Like, this entire relationship is made up. There's pretty much zero evidence that Marilyn Monroe was in this throuple relationship with the two men, and yet both in the book and in the film, it is an extremely important part of her character, and is the foundation for pretty much all of her later relationships. Again, in the book, this relationship is much more complex and interesting and well-developed than it is in the film. The film reduces it largely to sex, whereas the novel explores some more of the psychological and artistic aspects of it. Again, the novel is taking a huge liberty with the real world here, but that's kind of obvious in terms of reading it as a novel. That is not as obvious if you are watching this just as a film and expecting it to be truthful to life. This raises the question of like how open to criticism should biopics and films based on true stories be for not being historically accurate. This has been a conversation going on since the beginning of films based on inspired by true events, and I'm not going to get into it now. But I think that this film definitely blurs that line between fiction and like biopic more than most movies do, like Titanic or something, for instance. This is a lot more like something such as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which, as far as I know, received little to no heat for the way it changed events around the Manson murders. This film does a very similar thing with Blonde, yet because it kind of exists under this veneer of fact, because it's so well produced and so detailed in its recreation of images, people want to buy into it more as an historical retelling than they would something revisionist like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. What I'm really trying to lay out here is that I think Blonde basically needs to be evaluated on 3 levels. First, it needs to be looked at as just like a film, as a movie, as you would any other film. Second, it needs to be looked at as an adaptation. How does it work as an adaptation of the novel upon which it's based? And then third and last, it needs to be looked at as a biopic or representation of historical people and events. A lot of people are unwilling to recognize these three tiers, this pincer of criticism, and just want to lump them all again into that very unsatisfying version of the pickle and ham roll. Most criticism of the film ignore all three of these elements and just really launch into, again, that social outcry, ethical, reactionary, controversy aspect of criticism, which I think is so damaging to these other important forms of criticism that can be levied at the film. So, to return back to that original question, is film criticism dead? I mean, no, obviously not. Like I said earlier, it's just changed. It changes with the mood of people. And I think as people are continuously shifting their time and energy to short form format, to shorter format forms, to things like TikTok or shorter YouTube videos and reviews and reactions instead of actual criticism, we're just seeing a lot more criticism that is based on reaction. And reaction is usually based on controversy of some kind. And look, the accessibility that things like TikTok and YouTube and the internet in general have given to people in terms of film criticism is absolutely amazing. I mean, obviously, like, I'm here talking about this and you're watching it. It's so... I can't even put into words how great it is how many people have access to film and criticism now who wouldn't have, like, 20 years ago. But I think it's important for us to have conversations about how criticism is changing as a result. When the focus is on videos that need to be short and snappy and keep people engaged for 30 to 60 seconds, instead of on long-form criticism and discussion, yes, obviously, the things criticism focus on are going to change. It's going to change to highlight what people are most interested in at the time, which is usually the ethics or social justice or correct representation of certain groups, people, places, whatever, in the media they consume. That's just the way it is. Again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it's changing how people are viewing and engaging with movies, and we need to be aware of that and having conversations about that if we do want to preserve long-form, in-depth, cohesive criticism. I'm not saying that this type of long-form, academic, cohesive criticism and theory and reading whatever is going away. Obviously, there are thousands of articles and theses and essays and whatever being written dissecting works every single day. Like, you can never read all of them, and most of them you probably wouldn't want to anyway. But I do think that we need to become cautiously aware that this is a type of criticism that is going to become less and less popular and needs to be kind of protected in a certain sense, or at least discussed in an accessible way so that these people can make the jump from very basic baby step criticism to nuanced in-depth criticism. Because it's not that most people are incapable. It's just that they are unwilling or unaware that these other forms of criticism exist. Like, when you sit down and discuss things with most people, they're willing to listen and understand and, again, engage in that dialogue-driven manner that I think criticism is meant for. Watching and reading books takes a lot of time. Time that a lot of people aren't willing or often aren't able to invest. It is a lot easier and a lot of times a lot more entertaining to watch short videos listening to other people talk about things and telling you what to think. Watching and engaging with outrage criticism can be a much better alternative for people who are interested, but not quite interested enough to put in the heavy legwork themselves. So these people watch these videos, then go back out into the world and talk to people they know about what they've heard and seen, and then those people repeat what they have heard and seen, and then the criticism around something like Blonde. So, again, what then is the solution? I don't know. But my main point here, and the closest thing to a solution I have, is that I implore you to just watch the shit you talk about. Please don't watch content about something you haven't seen. Or if you do, do not form your opinion on said content based on what person in that video has said. Engage with content beyond surface level reactions and really ask yourself the why behind certain decisions. If you have a certain reaction to a movie or it doesn't sit right with you, you're probably right to feel that way. But I think it is important for us as viewers, as reviewers, as critics, as fans, as writers, as whatever, to make sure we're putting in the time to understand why we are feeling a certain way and try to put that into words as best we can. So no, film criticism isn't dead, but reactions to things like Blonde or pushback to the appraise of something like Everything Everywhere All at Once or The Whale are evidence to me that we need to have serious conversations about criticism. Just because you don't understand or like something doesn't invalidate why somebody else did, or vice versa. I think it's important we continue to educate each other and talk about what makes things work or not work, instead of relying on Gauging a film based on whether it is or is not ethically produced. I don't have a good ending to this video. I thought I would. I thought I'd have a better conclusion, but I guess that was it. So, I guess this is some sloppy criticism, isn't it? Thanks for watching, guys. Let me know what you'd like to see me talk about more in the future, and let me know if you liked this video, if you didn't, and if you think I'm a big dum-dum head. Because if you do, it's okay. I am a big dum-dum head. But that's life. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.